Ladies and gentlemen, we are here in Heroes of the Storm to take a look at the latest hero added to the technical alpha, Chen Stormstout. Chen has been added to the alpha as a warrior with some slightly unique mechanics. He does not have a mana pool, so we'll go ahead and go over that first, his trait and what makes him kind of a unique warrior in this case. You do not have mana, you have brew. You have 100, no matter what level you are at. You can change this with talents. Brew is used when you use your abilities. As you can see here, this ability takes 10, this takes 20, and this one takes 30. So using your abilities will consume the brew. The brew will not come back on its own. You have to use your trait, Fortifying Brew. Has a 5-second cooldown. You drink from your keg, you gain 30 brew and 760 temporary shields per second, up to a maximum of 2,280 while drinking. So basically you get a percentage of your health, about a quarter of your life here, a little more, while drinking. The shields will persist for 2 seconds after you stop drinking. So if I use the ability, you can see I drink from my keg, I gain some shields, and you can see the health bar goes up over the maximum health to represent the shields. You can do this at any time, even when you're full. So you can use this as kind of a tanking mechanic. If you're taking a bunch of damage, you're in a team fight, you want to try and absorb the damage for your allies, you can go ahead and use this to try and survive. Now, because this is your resource regeneration, that means Shen is very much a burst type character, not very good with sustain. The moment I use all of my abilities twice, I have no brew left to use it to do anything with. And since your abilities do not add up to an even 50 unless you're using only 2 of them, you have some choices to make on how you use your abilities. So that can make things very interesting for your combat decisions. So you have to be very mindful of where your brew's at, what you're about to do, and while you're chasing the enemy, you want to kind of get used to using your brew as you go. You don't have to continue to use it. You can drink for a moment, stop. That's why it gives you 30 per second and not just saying it gives you maximum brew. If I use all of my brew, you'll notice that it comes back completely before he finishes drinking. The drinking part really just brings you the shields. As you can see, I'm done, but I'm still drinking. But it gives me more shields. It allows me to continue to generate shields over time. So I can use that very defensively. So let's look at the other abilities that you get to use your brew on. The first is Flying Kick. This only takes 5 brew. Every ability you have only has a 5-second cooldown. Flying Kick will kick to the enemy. In this case, it will deal 345 damage. If we put it in perspective, his other abilities do about 160 and 300 apiece. So it is actually a moderate damage dealing ability, not his hardest hitting. It is mostly for movement. You fly through the target, and then you appear behind them, like so. You can use it for chasing, you can use it for engaging, you can even use it for escaping if an enemy is in your path of escape. The important part here is that the kick takes you through the enemy and allows you to block the enemy's escape when you use it. The next ability that Shen has is the Keg Smash. This one takes 20 brew. You smash the keg and you do 160 damage here, drenching the opponents in brew, and you slow them by 25% for 2.5 seconds. This ability doesn't hit very hard. It's not meant to. It is meant to slow the enemy. But it is also meant to fuel your most damaging attack, and that is the Breath of Fire. The Breath of Fire is a cone of flame, and here at level 30 it does 300 damage. Anything that's soaked in brew will be set alight and take another 300 damage over 3. So if you have them soaked in brew, you double the damage that your Breath of Fire does. You see that he's soaked there, but the moment I hit him with the fire, it consumes the brew, or at least appears to. So you have a choice here. Either you use your brew to slow them, and continue to attack with, say, your flying kicks and auto attacks. Or, do you try to do damage? Use your brew, and then use your flame to set them alight. But as you can see, Shen is very much bursting. You put down the damage, and then you're kind of out of brew for a bit here. I used all 3 abilities. That takes a total of 60. Now I'm down to 40. So I have a choice. I can use Breath of Fire, and I can use Flying Kick. Or I can use Brew twice, but I can't use my full combo again. I can't use Keg and Breath of Fire because I'm out of brew. So I could basically use my brew real quick, drink from my Keg with Fortifying Brew, and then try and do the burst damage. There are a lot of decisions that you have to make on the fly when you're using Shen. But the good news is, even though he is very bursty, he's also very sustainable. You never have to worry about going back for mana. So Shen is very useful for holding a lane. He can basically put down his brew, do damage to the lane, retreat a little bit, brew up, heal himself, and he's good to go. Another useful trait about having this brew and your defenses is you can sit here and you can take damage from towers. So let me reset the level. I'm going to go towards the towers, and I can show you just how defensive you can be using this brew. Let me go ahead and refresh the forts, and you'll just see here, when I get here, I start taking damage from both towers. But watch my health as I use my shields. You see, I can actually sit here and take a few hits from those towers just by using my brew. At this level, it's not suggested because they are doing more damage than I'm healing or that I'm gaining shields. But as you go through the fight, as you become more hardy because you are a warrior, you are designed to take hits, you can actually sit there and tank hits from the tower. And you can explicitly tank hits from the enemy creep line. As a matter of fact, during certain encounters while building tanky, I have been able to tank the entire creep line and towers hitting me at the same time while using Fortifying Brew. So he can be very defensive when he needs to be, but of course, enemy players will know to watch out for him using his brew, maybe avoid hitting him and hit other enemies. Alright, let's go ahead and look at the ultimates. At level 10, you have a choice between Wandering Keg and Storm, Earth, and Fire. Both very unique and very different and will be useful for different styles of play. Wandering Keg is the first one you get, and it is the more utility-based. It is a 90-second cooldown. You jump inside your barrel. You gain, in this case, 4,000 point shield, so about half your health in shields at this level. And you roll towards the cursor. You can deal 180 damage to enemies in the way, and you knock them back. So it doesn't do a lot of damage. The whole point of this is the knockback. And you stay in this form for 5 seconds or until the shield is broken. So the idea here is this is more utility and tanking based. Because you have a shield, you can use it to escape. But because it has a knockback, you can use it to push enemies where you want them. So if I use it, you'll see I follow the cursor. I knock enemies around where I want them. It's not super quick, but it doesn't need to be. In a team fight, you can use this to push away enemies that are troublesome, while pushing enemies that you need to do damage to towards your allies. You simply get in the middle of a group of enemies and just start pushing them around. Maybe you need to clear an objective. Maybe you're trying to get the tribute on the Raven map. You can use this to push the enemy team away from the tribute while your team grabs it. You have 5 seconds to try and keep them away, and that can be enough for your team to grab the tribute. If that's not enough, at level 10, you can modify it further. You can get the unstoppable, or the untapped potential. It increases the duration by 2 seconds, and additionally, you gain 5% movement speed whenever an enemy is hit, up to double the movement speed. So I'll go ahead and grab this, and I'll use it to hit some of the enemies here so you can kind of see exactly what it does, how fast it can go. Now, it's movement speed whenever an enemy is hit, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a hero. So I'll just go ahead and use this now. And you can see just how quickly you start to move, and how much of a threat you can be, how much of the enemy you can disperse. You start moving in a circle around the enemy and pushing them around. So I can push Arthas around, push an enemy away, or push an ally away from him, go back to Arthas, go back to the other enemy, back and forth, as much as I need to. Now the other ultimate you get, which is more offensive in nature, is Storm, Earth, and Fire. This one consumes 10 brew and has a 100-second cooldown. You split into 3 elemental spirits for 15 seconds, each which has 50% of your maximum health, and enables 2 new leaping attacks for use. Those are basically the only attacks you get. You will get 2 abilities once you've used it, and I'll show you here in a moment. The three forms you have, of course, are Storm, Earth, and Fire. Storm is a ranged attack, which does 180 damage per hit. Earth attacks slowly, but does 110% damage, but also slows the enemy by 25%. Fire attacks quickly and does 48 damage per hit. So Fire is more the damage dealer, Earth is the utility one for slows, and Storm, you can keep your distance and still hit things. So let's kind of show you how this works, because it's a very unique mechanic, and it's interesting. I haven't really seen it used through its full potential, I think. Well, let's go ahead and use it now. And you'll see that here I am. I'm split into 3 characters now. And I have full control over all of them. I can't control them independently. But they will move as a group, and they will attack a target that I designate. So you can see the Storm one stays at a distance, the Fire one hits quickly, and the Earth one is attacking slowly and doing damage as well. Slowing the enemy as well. Now, what I've noticed when using this ability is that you will typically respawn wherever the Storm character is. Now, to try and show how that can be different, I don't think these things are going to kill my Storm character fast enough. So unfortunately, I will be able to really show how that is affected, though, when each one dies. Each of these characters can die. And once they're all dead, you return to your standard form, back wherever the last one standing exists. If all 3 are up, or if any combination of them up, the Storm one is typically where you will respawn. At least that has been my experience when using this ability. Now, beyond moving as a group, you have 2 jump attacks. I'll go over this one first, because this is the one that's easily noticeable. This is split up. For every 6 seconds, you can split up, you can spread out, and you jump a short distance away from each other. So I'll go ahead and show that now. You can see everything moves apart, and then they'll still move towards the cursor. There we go. You can see they move apart, and you can use that to kind of disrupt the enemy. You'll be hitting the enemy. Maybe they start focusing you down. You can just go ahead and split up. Now, the other ability, which I'll go over once this resets here, is Triple Attack. You order the spirits to smash the targeted point, and they do 130 damage per spirit alive, and it slows the enemies in the area by 20% for 2 seconds. So you're looking at 390 damage about. You hit Q, and you can see it's a fairly wide circle, and they will all jump to that location. You can use this to jump walls. You can even use this. You can even use split up to jump walls for the most part. You have to be very careful though, because when you do get split up like this, and you'll see again that the Earth Spirit or the Storm Spirit will be the one that spawns me. Now, I can't use my Flying Kick, thankfully, to get past barriers. As you've seen, I showed that the Flying Kick can use past enemies. I did not show earlier that you can use it to fly past barriers. Keep that in mind. If you try to use Flying Kick and you're by a wall, it may get you stuck behind a wall. So what you can use, or what you can do, is split up and then pounce on somebody if you so desire. So you have 2 abilities that you can use to try and keep yourself alive, to try and confuse the enemy in this form. This is a very complicated form, very difficult to really say how it can be used fully effectively. Certainly it splits up your health and can keep you alive by keeping the enemy guessing, and it does do a decent amount of damage when you pounce on an enemy with it. But because each character only has about half of your health pool, they can be fairly easy to destroy. Now, the good news is, since each of them has 50%, you technically have 150% health. So you have 2 characters that die, you still have 1 character that has 50% of your health. So you can use it as a defensive cooldown if you so desire. The other interesting thing about this ultimate is that the modifier at level 20 doesn't actually modify the ultimate itself. Elemental Conduit gives you an additional passive. Using an ability will cause one of the elemental spirits to fight for you for 5 seconds, and it has a 9-second cooldown. So that means every 4 seconds you won't have an ally with you, but when it is up, you will have them. So this is really like giving me a whole new passive ability. So the ultimate itself, to be honest, doesn't seem all that impressive, but once you modify it, it can be pretty useful in the middle of a lane. Now, unfortunately, you have to get level 20 for this to be the case, but I can go ahead and show you what you get. Depending upon which ability you get, dictates which spirits you get. To get Storm, you have to use Flying Kick. To get Earth, you use Keg Smash. to get fire, obviously, you use Breath of Flame. So here, if I use Breath of Flame, you'll see there's the Fire Spirit, it spawns, and it starts doing a bunch of damage. Now, normally, if you're trying to do maximum damage, you would Keg Smash and then go into Breath of Fire. But if you Keg Smash first, then you get the Earth Element, which attacks slowly. But the good news about the Earth Element is that it continues to do a slowing element as well. So if you are trying to slow the enemy, but you also want to do more damage, you can Keg Smash to slow, and then Breath of Fire, but they're still getting hit by the Earth Spirit. So even though you consumed the brew with your Fire Breath, the Earth Spirit is hitting them from Keg Smash. So they're still getting slowed while the Earth Spirit chases them. Keep in mind that it is only for 5 seconds, but that is longer than Keg Smash itself lasts, which is only 2.5 seconds. So once again, to kind of show you're getting another ability, I will go ahead and use the Flying Kick. So if you want to spawn the Storm Spirit, you can, and he will sit there and do damage. Now keep in mind that they are transparent, they do not have health, they cannot be destroyed, they are simply there to do additional damage. So all this together really shows that Shen has some very interesting abilities that make him kind of a unique character to play. Despite the fact that Storm, Earth, and Fire has this unique capability, though, I still have favoritism towards the Wandering Keg, just because its utility is really second to none in a lot of cases. Because it gives you so much health in the shields, you can use it to run away. Because you can gain so much speed at level 20, you can use it to disrupt an entire enemy team in a team fight. It just seems to be the better choice of the two. So I look forward to seeing if Storm, Earth, and Fire is modified in any way, but if you like to build damage base, you can still use this ultimate. Let's go over the talents that you get for Shen now. The first level is pretty simple. A lot of these are pretty passive, so we can go over them fairly quickly. The first is Deadly Strike. It modifies your Flying Kick and increases its damage by 50%. Very straightforward. Flying Kick is kind of a mid-level damage here. You can see it does 55 damage at level 1. But that's more than Breath of Fire if you don't count Keg Smash. The next ability is Full Keg. This takes Keg Smash and increases the duration that enemies are slowed by 1.5 seconds. This is one that you want to be very careful with, because if you are very trigger happy, as I tend to be, using Keg Smash into Breath of Fire very quickly, you will consume the slow with the Breath of Fire. So you'll want to make sure that you let the keg stay on the enemy a little bit longer. On the upside, though, is that because they are drenched for longer, you have a longer lead-up time. So you can put the keg, smash it down, drink your brew with Fortifying Brew, and then put down the Flame Breath within about the, 3-4 seconds that you have between the slow's application and the Breath of Fire. You could go with Consuming Flame. This modifies Breath of Fire to the burn effect used on soaked targets is increased by 2 seconds. Now you might think that this would actually weaken Breath of Fire because it deals damage over time. It deals here, as it says, 39 over 3 seconds. You would think that if it does 39 over 5 seconds, it would actually be less damage per second. It would just last longer. What it doesn't tell you is it does increase the damage, so it is perfectly in sync with it. So you can see here I have 39 over 3. If I gain Consuming Flames, it is actually 65 over 5. The same damage per second rules apply. The last ability at level 1 is Regeneration Master, which is another one of the standard tank abilities. So if you want to build Warrior, you can go with Regeneration Master, although you don't have to. Due to Shen's tankiness with his ability to drink his brew and gain a shield, Regeneration Master is one of those abilities that is quite nice, but is not necessarily required. As per usual, it gives you plus 4 health per second after gaining 3 regeneration globes, and that is a permanent buff that continues to stack throughout the match. At level 4, you have, again, some passive abilities, which do not make too many changes to your character's gameplay, but you can gain some additional brew here with Bottomless Mug, increase the maximum brew by 50. So if you are very used to spamming your abilities and you're used to chasing, this can be very helpful, because you don't get to use all of your abilities more than 1 or 2 cycles if you're careful. With this, you gain an additional 50 brew, allowing you to use more abilities as you chase, allowing you to stay into the fight a little bit longer before you have to chug down your brew. As with most warriors, Shen also gets Amplified Healing, which increases the healing and regeneration effects by 30% from all sources, and this, of course, does include things like Regeneration Master and other talents that you have that will give you additional health. So while we talked about increasing your maximum brew at this level, you can alternatively choose to get Fortifying Brew gains twice as fast with Chug. So you can now gain your brew quickly and go back into the fight just as fast. So you have a choice here. Do you front load your damage with Bottomless Mug and allow yourself to do your abilities very quickly before having to drink? Or do you allow yourself to drink and then not have to drink for as long? To show the difference, I will go ahead and use my brew. And then I will show off how long it takes to drink. There, and I'm back in the fight. Now, if we get twice as fast, I'll go ahead and use all of my brew once again. Drink. And you can see I'm back in the fight at half the speed. Lastly, at level 4, you can get Deep Breath, which the range and arc of Breath of Fire is increased by 25%. To put it in perspective, here is the basic arc, and here is the modified arc. You see that it covers a very wide area once you've picked this talent. Now the downside is, of course, the keg does have a very small impact area, so the larger radius is quite nice for the Breath of Fire, but if you're going for the combination of Keg Smash, Breath of Fire, then know that not everything that you hit with Breath of Fire may be soaked because of the small impact area. At level 7, Chen gets the Swift Reflexes passive. Every 4 seconds, he can dodge an enemy hero's basic attack, preventing all of its damage. This is to signify that Chen is more of a monk than he is anything. So rather than get block, which reduces basic attack damage by 50%, you're allowed to basically completely negate damage every 4 seconds, but only on basic attacks. So that can still be quite useful, though, whereas instead of taking only half damage for a set period of time, you are completely avoiding damage from a source, and which can save your life or can basically reduce the damage that you're taking in a sustained environment. Other notable passives here at this level include Pressure Point, which modifies Flying Kick, which allows it to root the enemy for 1 second. This can be useful if you're trying to use it as a chasing tool or trying to get enemies stuck in a particular position. Modified with other talents, this can be quite useful. You can get Boulder Flavor, which shield regeneration and maximum shields from Fortifying Brew are increased by 40%. This is already pretty massive. So if you look at the regeneration you get and the shields you get, you can see they go up pretty high already. To once again show off how this works with the forts, here we are at level 7, and I'll take damage from both forts. And you can see that it does damage me just a little bit, but I'm pretty much staying point for point at the level that those towers can do damage. If I had the minions in the line as well, I would start taking additional damage. If I get Boulder Flavor, you'll notice that I gain those shields faster, and I gain more of them. So here I'm actually gaining health, as it were, in the form of shields, while these towers are hitting me. So if you want to talk about a character that can be very useful for pushing a lane and causing towers to lose all of their ammo, Chen is the character you want. If the enemy has left the lane, you can sit here and just make the towers use up all of their ammo. Just continually drink your brew with this kind of talent. And there you go. The lane is completely exhausted its ammo already, and I can push in and gain more experience for my team. Now, like many tanks or warriors, Chen does gain an AoE damage passive in the form of Ring of Fire. After using Breath of Fire, he will ignite in a fire aura, which does 26 damage every second to enemies nearby for 5 seconds. A lot of tanks seem to have this one to help them do damage in the lane. So I'll go ahead and use it now, and you can see there is the Ring of Fire around me, doing damage to everything around me. Now, the thing about Chen, though, that makes this very beautiful, even though it's not a lot of damage, you can still use it by putting down damage and then drinking, and you've got that damage aura around you. So while you're sitting here and you're being passive or being defensive, you're still doing some damage. This passive lasts for 5 seconds, which is essentially how long it takes you to drink your brew. to get it back. So you can basically drink your brew, put down the fire, drink your brew. This is very useful for a Shin that may also want to jungle. If you want to go out and help your team to gain allies in the jungle, you can. Even at the very beginning of the game, at level 1 usually, go out, put out damage, basically do some abilities, and drink. Gain your shield. Wait for it to cool down, wait for your cooldowns, do your damage, shield. It's a lot easier here at level 7 because then you've got the aura. So at level 7 you become a very powerful jungling force for your team. You're not going to kill them very quickly, but you're also not going to take a lot of damage. So you don't really need help unless you think the enemy is going to come after you. Now lastly, we have one of the more interesting talents here. In Brewmaster's Balance, while at or below 50 brew, you regenerate an additional 13 health per second, and that does scale with level. While at or above 50 brew, you gain 15% movement speed. The key point here is that at 50, you gain both benefits. So if I gain this ability, being above 50 brew gives me 15% movement speed. Allows me to chase, allows me to run away, get in position, whatever I need to do. Once I hit 50 or below, I start getting regeneration. This does stack with things like Amplified Healing and Regeneration Master. So if you're going for a regeneration build, this can be very useful. Now, this does not get modified in any way if you are using full keg, or sorry, not full keg, if you are using bottomless mug, which gives you additional 50 brew. The numbers don't change. It is at or above or below 50. So if you get bottomless mug, it will take you longer to get to the health regeneration part of the talent. You will have the movement speed longer. But you can see here I do have regeneration and movement speed while at 50. So if you decide to get bottomless mug, keep in mind that means more than likely if you pick up this talent, Brewmaster's Balance, you will be at higher movement speed for a majority of the fight, and you will be at more regeneration once you've utilized your abilities while you're chasing. To kind of show it off here, you can see at my basic level here, I have a regeneration of 7.37. When I use my abilities, I am now at 24.27, so a nice substantial jump. And I do want to point out again that the Amplified Healing does count in this case. So if I put this up, you can see I'm at 5.17. My natural and if I pick that up, my natural regeneration goes immediately to 6.71. All right, at level 13, I want to look at the passives first to speed things along a little bit. You have a Touch of Honey. You can increase the slow in your keg to 40%. So it starts off at 25%. Touch of Honey will increase it up to 40%. Meaning that this synergizes very well with full keg, which increases the slow duration. That makes Shin very lethal for coordinated teams. If you have an enemy that you know you need to kill to stop them from getting away, then Touch of Honey and the additional slow duration can be very useful to any team that has a Shin. Additionally, you can get Last Drop. In this case, if you drink for the full duration, so you can cancel early when you've maximized your brew. But in this case, if you drink for your full duration, your abilities will cost no brew for 5 seconds. So you can use this as part of a build to try and increase your sustainability or to allow yourself to do a bunch of abilities for at least 5 seconds after drinking, should you need to. So if you're trying to sustain a lane, you can drink up full, put down your abilities. Now keep in mind that you have to drink for the full duration. This does not mean that if you were to get Chug, that you could get it faster. You have to drink for the full duration. All Chug does is reduce the time it takes to get the full brew by half. You'll still get the brew at the same rate, but you still have to finish the complete drinking duration in order to get Last Drop to kick in. The final passive at this level is Relentless, which reduces the duration of silence, stuns, and slows and roots, polymorphs, and all that on your hero by 50%. Another standard tanking trait for staying into the battle as long as possible. Modifiers for this level are Brew Strike, Flying Kick, will reduce the cooldown by 1 second and will store 10 brew if you hit an enemy that is already brew soaked. What this means is it essentially makes Brew Strike free. You still need the 10 brew to use it. So if you're out of brew, you cannot use your flying kick because it refunds the cost. So you basically have to use the flying kick, you get the cooldown reduced, and you get the brew restored after use. But it does make your flying kick essentially free. So if you're going for a damage build and you want to use the kick more often, this can be quite useful because that means your kick now has a 4-second cooldown instead of a 5-second cooldown. Lastly, there's enough to share. Fortifying Brew also shields nearby allies for 44 per second. So you can pick that up, and if I use my Fortifying Brew, you'll see there's an aura around me, and anyone in this aura will get those shields. So you want to be in a team fight, you want to soak up damage, you can sit there, chug your brew, enemies will have a hard time killing you, and then they will also have a hard time killing your allies. Chen is very much a champion that works very well with other allies, with other characters. But he is also a character that works very well by himself just from his pure sustainability. So he has very many tricks up his sleeve that make him useful. You're probably seeing a theme here when it comes to Chen and the fact that most of his talents are pretty much of the passive variety, but there's also quite a few good modifiers here. Here at 16, we get Combination Attack. This is your next basic attack after Flying Kick will do 200% bonus damage. So it's a triple damage hit after using Flying Kick. As you can tell, this synergizes excellently with something like Brew Strike, which reduces the cooldown and, of course, refunds the cost, so you can use it more often. And you could also combine that, of course, with the increased damage of Flying Kick. But more importantly, you could use that with Pressure Point, which roots the enemy. So if you use Flying Kick, they're now rooted, they can't get away, and you're guaranteed to hit with the basic attack. Combat Stance modifies your trait so that the shields from Fortifying Brew will last an additional 2 seconds after drinking stop. So as you use your Fortifying Brew, it's very useful, but the shield only lasts for 2 seconds. Now that 2 seconds is enough to keep you alive, and it's enough to help you engage. So you basically drink up your brew just before you start an engagement to reduce the damage you take. Combat Stance really helps in that because that gives you 4 seconds of these shields. And as you've already seen, these shields are actually very strong. And you can combine that here with something like Bolder Flavor, which gives you more regeneration and more shields. So one thing that Chen has that is very nice about his kit is that a lot of his talents synergize together. And you can make very clear builds out of this. And you don't have to use them all. You can mix and match them. But there are talents that benefit greatly from choices you'll make down the line. So if you're playing as Chen, you probably want to consider how you're going to build him when you get into a match. You can still build him reactively like every other character because all of his abilities can be useful for different situations, but some of them just work together very well. Combustion is an interesting talent here at 16. Breath of Fire will now deal its damage immediately to brew-soaked enemies instead of lighting them on fire. Now what I want to point out here is that Combustion lists a damage number. At level 30, it will say it does 600 damage. What this does is this basically takes your Breath of Fire and the Combustion part where you light them on fire and combines them and makes it do the damage instantly. This talent does not increase your damage in any way, shape, or form. The only thing this does is allow you to do more burst damage rather than more sustained or damage over time. The damage you do is still technically the same. Why would you want this? Well, the difference between instant damage and sustained damage is that someone might get a heal off in time. Say you're burning down an enemy and they are about to die. You might see this when you use poisons, like if you have Envenom. You have an enemy that has no health left, their life bar is in that green state, all you have to do is wait for it to tick down and they're dead. Well, that's enough time for them to get away, get to a fountain, get a heal. Any number of things could prevent them from dying, including something like Ice Block. They could basically Ice Block through the damage and be fine and get away. So this allows you to do that damage instantly so they don't have that chance to escape. But it does not increase your damage. For that, you want to look at something like Combination Attack at this level. It can be quite useful. Now, for those who are curious, this does combine with Consuming Flames. As I mentioned earlier, consuming flames increases the duration, but also increases the damage of your ring of fire, of your breath of fire. This does work with combustion. If you look at the tooltip, when you have the consuming flames, the damage number on this tooltip doesn't change. But I have tested it, and I can verify that yes, combustion will increase in damage if you have both. So at level 30, you're doing 800 damage rather than 600. So you don't have to worry about taking combustion if you've already taken consuming flame. They will work together. The last ability on this tier is KageKaze, which increases the range of Keg Smash by 200%, no less. Keg Smash is a wonderful ability in the fact that it slows, but as you can see, it's very, very close range. It makes it sometimes difficult to use in the scenarios where you're trying to maybe stop an enemy from getting away. Usually what you have to do is flying kick in and then hit them with the keg. But if you're if you're trying to do a build where you're getting that refresh with the enemies already soaked, that doesn't work for you. This might be a way around that. So while the range here is very short, Keg Toss, as you can see, really increases this range. I can now hit enemies all the way down the lane from all the way over here. So this can be very much a useful utility ability, but it can also be very useful for anyone that's building, say, with Bruise Strike in mind. But with Bruise Strike, you may want to end up going with combination attack anyway. It really depends on how you, of course, want to build your character.
Choose a talent.
Alright, we're at the last talents, of course, level 20, and we've got the same talents that you've kind of seen throughout these videos. We've got Resurgence of the Storm and Bolt of the Storm. Being a warrior, you pretty much get utility abilities. The ability to teleport a short distance with Bolt of the Storm, and Resurgence of the Storm allows you to respawn after dying. Typically, you'll see this one on a lot of the tanks. You want to get in there and soak up a bunch of damage, and typically, you're in a position, more so than most, to die, because you're going in first most of the time. And so Resurgence of the Storm allows you to do that, and for every 2 minutes, go back in. And so you die, okay, cool, now you've got a 2-minute window that you respawned, and you can now continue to help your team. Bolt of the Storm, of course, is quite useful for moving around, escaping, engaging. And I'll go ahead and show it off for anyone that may not have ever seen this in action, since I don't typically pick up this ability. It's a very short cooldown, 40 seconds, so it can be quite useful. But, you know, when we're looking at Shen and looking at his modifiers, if you go Untapped Potential, or if you go with, Wandering Keg, Untapped Potential is just really one of those ones I would suggest. Untapped Potential will save you, and it will also help you push enemies away. Now, it doesn't have the short cooldown that Bolt of the Storm has, but if you're in a pinch and you really need to run away, Untapped Potential, if you're running away, you pop this, you pop your barrel, and you hit the enemy a few times, you can run away very quickly because you've just increased the movement speed beyond what they can follow, and you have shields up to half your health. Resurgence of the Storm is a viable alternative. If you're going in and you're dying a lot, that's obviously going to be up to you. But honestly, I would say Untapped Potential is probably one of the best, and probably the choice I would typically take for this character. Elemental Conduit is very nice if you've picked up that particular talent, but it's very difficult to say. Once again, I've not really seen Elemental Conduit used to its full potential, and I'm not entirely sure if it's fully balanced just yet, so it's one of those things that's really hard to recommend until I can really play around with it more, or actually maybe even see some people play around with it more. I've tried using it a bit. I've found that I may not be very useful with it, but some people may have other results. So that's the whole point, right? You have something to choose should you decide to go for a more offensive build for this warrior. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for watching this video of the abilities and talents for Chen Stormstout. Keep in mind that this is in the alpha version of Heroes of the Storm, and anything you see here could potentially change at any given time. And with that, I will leave you with Shen's quips as I click on him multiple times and annoy him. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.
Hey, yo! Is trouble brewing? Accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative. Oh yes, I have many, many stories to tell. Would you like to hear one? $9.95 per minute. An interesting old man once told me, Stay thirsty, my friend. Such terrible advice. Homebrew is the best brew because you can drink it right away. You know, if you're in the area, you should stop by the Stormstout brewery. It seems like there's always chores to do. A wise man once said, an empty cup is simply one that has not been refilled. It is important to master the brew and not let it master you. Oh, and to drink a lot of water. That is also important. Not all who wander are lost. I mean, sure, I'm lost, but not all of us are. For some, the journey is the destination. The wanderer's way is to observe, to drink in another's culture, then to take that knowledge and live a fulfilled life. The Dark Wanderer's way, however, hey, let's just say it ends badly. To ask why we fight is to ask why you are playing Heroes of the Storm. It is for the experience. Perhaps there is a better question. Chen Stormstout, Brewmaster. Ask for me by name and accept no cheap substitutes.
Okay, so I lied. That wasn't the last you'll hear from me on this video. Real quickly going over the skins and colors for Shin for those that are interested, as this was requested on one of my videos as I was going through each character. So here you have the basic Legendary Brewmaster in his typical blue, and of course we have a brown variant, and lastly a green. Very minor shader changes on this one, quite honestly. There's not a big difference between them, but you of course can pick if you so desire. The second skin that's available right now is War Master Shen, which is a lot better in this regard. You can see he actually has his hat on too, which is pretty cool. Now the downside here is if I move him just right, you can see he actually has a mask on underneath the hat, but you can never actually see it because the hat is obscuring it. So unfortunately I have no idea what the mask looks like. But the armor does look very cool. Now, if we look at this armor, though, further with the different recolors, we can see that this one actually does have a lot more in the color department. You can see it really does change his primary color. So here we have the red and the white. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is all of the skins and recolors for Chen Stormstout. Thank you very much.